Bruce Bochy comes out of retirement and he is going to manage the Texas Rangers, they announced today. Did this front office, it raises the question, push Bruce Bochy out the door? Is that why he, quote, retired? We'll get into the story and the truth next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, the big story of the day is that Bruce Bochy is coming out of retirement and he is going to manage the Texas Rangers. He signs a 3-year deal with the Rangers, so he's going to be there for a little while. And it's a big deal to them. It's a big deal if you're a fan of the Giants, given what Bochy means to this franchise. And so we're going to discuss the theories that have been out there ever since Bruce Bochy retired, and then a few months later he was doing a interview over the phone and he was just basically saying yeah, I'd like to manage again. And so it kind of was a little bit confusing in the sense that he said that he retired and then he's out there saying I want to manage again. So all the theories was he pushed out by essentially Farhan Zaidi and the new front office. And so I want to set the record straight. I cannot remember exactly where I read this, but I will find it if anyone seriously pushes back against this. But reputable reporters have said, and it may even be Larry Baer himself who said, that when the Giants were interviewing new Farhan Zaidi candidates, right, people to take over baseball operations, part of that interview process included telling those candidates that they would be able to pick a new manager after the 2019 season. Bochy would manage one more year, and then he was going to retire. And so, you can theorize about that, but the reality is, given that information, which again, I don't have, it's been so long since all of this happened, I don't remember exactly where I read that, but it wasn't, it wasn't TMZ or whatever. It was a reliable source that reported this. I can't remember who, but it's been widely reported that that's what was happening when they were interviewing Farhan Zaidi. Part of what they offered to make this an attractive job, because you're recruiting, for example, Farhan Zaidi from being the GM of the Dodgers, where they're a very successful organization, not in the playoffs, but So I think part of it was just, it's only right in a lot of ways when you take over an organization like Farhan Zaidi did, that you shouldn't kind of inherit a manager per se, especially it's complicated with Bruce Bochy because he was so successful here. You can't be the new guy and ever fire Bruce Bochy, essentially. And I'm not saying he should be fired per se, but what I am saying is it's a little bit of an awkward situation. And I think that ultimately, and we discussed this the other day when we were reporting that Bochy was interviewing for this Texas Rangers job, I think ultimately Bochy is just a humble enough guy to kind of read the room. And I'm sure there were discussions with Larry Baer and with everybody just about saying, the era is over and, I'm willing to step down from managing the Giants, given I think that whoever comes in to take over baseball operations should get the chance to hire their own guy. And so I really believe that it kind of speaks to Bochy's character as much as anything. And the story is not at all that Bochy was pushed out by the front office, because in fact, it was the Giants themselves, before they even started interviewing candidates, telling then the candidates that they would get to hire a new manager after 2019. So the plan was already laid out. And so I don't know exactly how they came to that, but they came to it. And for Bochy, the chapter was written. I mean, his time in San Francisco, you can't really. It's the legacy is there no matter what. You couldn't. I mean, I guess if he won more championships, you could add to the legacy, but you certainly couldn't really hurt the legacy unless I guess he. I don't know. It's just I think it was time, and it made sense, and it's fine, and we don't have to get all worked up about Bochy managing the Rangers. I mean, I'm happy for him if obviously it's what he wants to do, and the Rangers are a really interesting team to be managing right now. They're really committed to getting better. They went out last offseason and signed a couple of really good players in Marcus Semien and Corey Seager. It didn't really translate to a great season in 2022, but they're hoping that another offseason with more additions probably, and also bringing in a manager in Bochy, is going to help them turn things around. This is not an organization that has historically been all that successful. You know, Bochy's in 2010, Bochy was the manager of the team that beat the Rangers in the World Series, and then they lost another heartbreaking World Series in 2011 as well. So Bochy had this to say in the press release by the Rangers, quote, "I am incredibly excited to be joining the Texas Rangers. Over the last several years, I've had extensive conversations, over the last several days, I've had extensive conversations with Chris Young and other individuals in the organization, and I had the chance to meet with Ray Davis. Their vision and commitment to putting together a club that can contend and win year in and year out is impressive, and I became convinced I wanted to be a part of that. If I was going to return to managing, it had to be the right situation. I strongly believe that to be the case with the Rangers, and I can't wait to get started." So, interestingly, Bochy actually managed Chris Young, who's the GM of the Rangers he just referred to there. GM, or President of Baseball Operations. Hard to keep track with all the different titles floating around these days, but it's a big deal, and I wish him luck. Giants, the way the new schedule works, they'll be playing the Rangers every year, and so Bochy, I think, comes with the Rangers to San Francisco in August of 2023. So that'll be interesting for sure. Wishing him nothing but the best, except when the Giants are playing the Rangers. And what's interesting, the really interesting dynamic at play is kind of this. I don't want to make it like tribalism, new school versus old school, but just the dynamics with managers is changing. Like for a while, there was this trend of kind of hiring young, inexperienced managers who were kind of the new school, and it's kind of reverse course, especially for a lot of teams that did that and then it didn't work out. They fired those new school guys, and then they've hired more of traditional managers, and the Rangers are no exception. So we're going to explore that dynamic and talk about how it relates to the Giants and Gabe Kapler. We'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, betonline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. Can't believe basketball is already here. Find all the latest developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis of every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there, including MLB off-season odds you can find at BetOnline, which I find very interesting. Looking at, Aaron Judge, by the way, another rumor coming out yesterday, Larry Krueger stating a source, which I don't fully believe, but he said on Twitter, his source says 95% chance Aaron Judge will be on the Giants. His Giants source. Okay, I don't know if I believe that, but you can head to BetOnline and see what the betting markets think. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, we are going to continue. I want to look at the dynamics here in Major League Baseball. It is a very interesting dynamic at play here with again, I hate to put it into black and white, new school, old school, but really, I mean, we talk about like inexperienced managers who certainly kind of understand the modern tilt of the game and are, people say like puppets of the front office. I don't like that terminology either, but certainly they're more in sync. Traditionally, you had your front office, you had your manager, the front office got the players, You gave the players to the manager and his coaching staff, and that was that. You kind of stayed away. These days, there certainly has been a trend towards more kind of collaboration day in and day out with the front office. Farhan Zaidi, for the record, continuously says he has nothing to do with like making lineups or anything like that. He doesn't want to be involved in that stuff, and this is not necessarily typical. I think a lot of teams out there, the front office probably is more involved with making lineups and stuff like that. But Zaidi is a little bit, even though the reputation, just like I said, there's all these preconceived notions about what Farhan Zaidi is. He's in front of a computer. Nothing could be further from the truth in a lot of these stereotypes when all is said and done. But yeah, I mean, the trend towards hiring these inexperienced managers who are more in sync with the front office, and that was certainly the trend. And I mean, specifically in Texas, they went out and brought in Chris Woodward, who was with the Dodgers, right? And so the Dodgers lost a lot of their coaches to these types of roles. And then Jace Tingler, by the way, remember him? He managed the Padres for a little while. He came over from the Texas Rangers. And so, neither guy had any managing experience, and yet they got those managerial jobs, and neither one worked out, and they ultimately got fired, and both were then ultimately replaced by a more traditional manager who has a lot of experience. So it's kind of like politics. I'm not that much of an expert at all in politics, but isn't it typical that you have like a president and then people end up disliking the person and then you vote for someone who's really different from them? It's kind of like that in baseball. So Jace Tingler in San Diego, reports were that he kind of lost the clubhouse. Last year, the Padres really disappointed. They were supposed to be good, and they ended up below 500 last season in 2021. And what did they do? They went out and traded for Bob Melvin from the Oakland A's. So Melvin, of course, he's been around a long time. He did work for the Oakland A's, a more cutting-edge organization, I guess you could call them that, with Billy Beane and David Forst. But, Melvin is known as like a player's manager. He certainly has played the game professionally and has been around a while and has a lot of experience. And for the Texas Rangers, they go from Chris Woodward, no managing experience, and this year, was he even the manager? I can't even remember if he made it through all of this season. I think he did. I could be wrong. I'm just kind of blanking on their most recent manager. But there's just so much managerial turnover. Even Gabe Kapler in Philadelphia, he was one of those guys. Farm director with the Dodgers, former player, but then he goes to manage the Phillies with no managing experience. The thing I always kind of pump the brakes on is people are like, how can you hire someone with no experience? You have to everybody has to start somewhere. Like Bochy, all the guys with experience at some point had no experience. And I guess maybe the argument is like they didn't classically they weren't a bench coach for a long time under a manager, kind of learning the job. So there's a case there. I mean, certainly Gabe Kapler will tell you there's a learning curve and that things didn't always go smoothly in the beginning in Philadelphia, and they haven't always gone smoothly in San Francisco either. But it is just really interesting to take a step back and look at these managerial trends in Major League Baseball. I think there's a little bit over-tinkering. I think there's a little bit of over-tinkering going on with these teams and just kind of cycling through managers. And, even in San Francisco, the question has been asked to me, and I've seen it kind of written about and such, that, did Farhan Zaidi hire Gabe Kapler just as a short-term manager, and once the team got good, he was going to fire Kapler or let him walk and then hire somebody else? I think that's malarkey. I do believe the Giants value Farhan Zaidi coming from the Dodgers, who clearly value continuity. Dave Roberts was an inexperienced manager when he took over the Dodgers, and through thick and thin, I mean, mostly regular season overwhelming success, but a lot of playoff failures now, including this year, huge playoff failure, and they're going to bring him back. And I think that the Giants value that continuity as well. And I don't think, unless something crazy happens, that Gabe Kapler is really at risk of losing his job over just kind of impulsive decision making, like, oh, we had a disappointing year, we're going to fire our manager. There's too much of that going on in the game, and I think that's part of why you're seeing this tilt back to guys who you know what you're going to get. With Bochy, you know what you're going to get. Buck Showalter, hired after many years being out of managing, he's hired to take over a good team in New York. And think about Dusty Baker managing the Astros. We're kind of tilting back towards these experienced, I hate the phrase baseball men, but that's kind of the word that I would use to describe a lot of these guys. It's just people who have been around the game their whole lives and they're not necessarily of the Ivy League graduates kind of infiltrating the game. They're just guys who are baseball people. And Bochy is through and through a baseball guy. And he said he managed with his gut over all the years that he has managed. And so it's going to be interesting to see. To me, the big takeaway, or what I'm going to be looking for here, is who does Bochy have on his coaching staff? I mentioned this the other day, but I think we get too wrapped up in like the individual personality of the manager and thinking that has so much to do with the performance of the team per se. But I think these days, and what like Gabe Kapler has brought to the table, first and foremost is the environment of development at the major league level that frankly didn't exist in this capacity when Bruce Bochy was here. And that's not a knock on Bochy. It's just like for 100+ years, this is kind of how baseball was. And it's changed in the last decade. And Bochy, you can't expect someone to just immediately be in touch with all that. But, Gabe Kapler was, and a lot of the coaches, I mean, all of the coaches, it's a very untraditional coaching staff that the Giants have brought in, but I think it's extremely the direction that the game is heading. And if you don't do this, I think you're going to be left in the dust because you've got your competitors having the best possible developmental tools at their disposal for your major leaguers and ideally through your minor league system as well. So I'm going to be interested to see, like Donnie Ecker, who was with the Giants and was so valuable from everything we've heard, he went to Texas last year. And so he's still there. He's the offensive coordinator and bench coach. And so is he going to remain in that role? We'll discuss that whole situation in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, I just want to kind of wrap up that thought. It's just fascinating to me. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Bruce Bochy's coaching staff. What happens specifically with Donnie Ecker? I would imagine, and this is what I mentioned the other day, that like Bochy, I think that possibly the direction that the game is going is that you're going to see perhaps managers like Bochy, but maybe the front office has more of a say in kind of helping you put together your coaching staff. Whereas traditional coaching staffs, the staffs under Bochy, for example, with the Giants, yes, there was like, obviously they are trying to make the players better, but you would just hire a hitting coach who just basically has some experience, like someone who is a former player and just wants to be a hitting coach versus, and all the classical hitting instruction. It didn't necessarily make you good. And we would always say, not just us on Locked On Giants, but as an industry, we would say, hitting coaches, because people, fans would want them fired if the team was struggling offensively. And we would say, truthfully, hitting coaches don't make much of an influence on the offense. And if you weren't really into baseball, that might strike you as dumbfounding. And it turns out you were right. It is dumbfounding in retrospect. But it was kind of widely believed that good hitters were good hitters and bad hitters were flawed hitters, and there was not much you could do about it. But that has changed, and the developmental kind of tools that are out there, I know about them, but I'm not well versed in them per se. But basically, biomechanical information, you can put sensors on your bats and see like what is the angle at which you're taking your swing, and what is the angle of the bat when you make contact, how hard are you hitting the ball, how fast is your bat going, looking at your mechanics of your swing by wearing devices that kind of track where your limbs are moving. All kinds of stuff like that is happening in the game. Virtual reality headsets that you can use to train. On the pitching side, the Edgertronic cameras and all the stuff Driveline is doing. There's just so much of that, and it's kind of coming in enormous waves into Major League Baseball that you really can't just have a traditional hitting coach who doesn't have any experience with any of that stuff and expect it to work, at least in my opinion. And so I think that with Bochy, you'll probably see Donnie Ecker keep that role. I'm sure there's, mutual respect in a way. They've got the Giants connection there and they can bond over that. And I think that Bochy is smart enough to recognize that you kind of need to have this stuff. You can blend the two of those philosophies together. You can have Bochy and his stabilizing presence and leadership qualities, and you can have this cutting edge instruction. And that, I think, is kind of the trend we're seeing. We saw it with the Padres. Some of the coaching staff is more traditional with San Diego under Bob Melvin, but they've also got some of the new school kind of hitting philosophy instructors, including I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's like Bradar or something like that. But he was with the Giants, kind of director of hitting in the minors. I don't know exactly what his title was. I'm forgetting. But Bob Melvin hired this guy as their major league hitting coach. And so I think that it's possible to blend those two things together. And that appears, that's what I would guess that the Texas Rangers are trying to do. And that's what I'm seeing is somewhat of the trend in Major League Baseball. So it is interesting. It's changing on the fly. And ultimately, I think it's fine. Teams can decide to do what they want to do. For the Giants, it is what it is. Bochy is going to manage the Texas Rangers, and Gabe Kapler is currently the manager of the Giants. And he's done a pretty good job when all is said and done. 2 roughly 500 seasons, 1 exactly 500, 1 2 games below 500 in a shortened season, and 1 107 win season. It's kind of, obviously no playoff success. They did take the Dodgers to Game 5. Dodgers 106 win team, and it was a 1-run loss in Game 5. But ultimately, time will tell. Ultimately you're going to have some postseason success to be viewed as ultimately a good manager when all is said and done. And Bochy has that. And so we'll see if he can bring that to Texas. They didn't have a good year this year, so it'll be fascinating to see what happens next year. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now make your second listen, especially this time of year with so much going on in sports, the Locked On Sports Today podcast. You can find it on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. It's the perfect way to catch up on all the big stories in sports from the local experts of Locked On. It's a daily podcast version of your old school sports page. Your ESPN.com front page is the complete recap of the night before from Locked On. It's really fantastic. I would encourage you to check it out. We're going to link a video. If you're watching on YouTube, it's going to be there when we put up the final graphic there. You can click on the link to check out the show, Locked On Sports Today. Anyway, once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. Really hope you enjoyed today's show. Have a great weekend. See you on Monday. You are now Locked On Giants.